What if I told you that one of the richest women in American history was a black entrepreneur worth millions before World War I? What if that woman built a mansion so extravagant that it rivaled the homes of the richest men in America? What if that same woman spent more money on charity than John D. Rockefeller himself? And what if I told you that today, almost nobody remembers her name? Her fortune once matched the wealth of industrial giants like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, and J.P. Morgan. Her company generated millions of dollars every single year. Her mansion had dozens of rooms, private theaters, and imported European architecture that took years to build. But today, that mansion sits empty and forgotten. The woman behind it, she has been nearly erased from history. So how did Annie Malone build one of the most powerful beauty empires in America? How did she spend fortunes larger than Rockefeller on philanthropy and education? And how did she lose almost everything? This is the story of a woman who changed American business forever but whose legacy was lost to time. To understand Annie Malone's incredible story, we have to go back to the late 1800s, when America was booming with opportunity and wealth. The country was exploding with energy, oil tycoons were making fortunes. Railroad barons were building empires that stretched across the nation. Steel kings were becoming some of the richest people on earth. Men like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, and J.P. Morgan were building financial empires that would define American capitalism. They were becoming household names. Their wealth was legendary, their influence was absolute. But while everyone was watching these men build their empires, something else was happening quietly in the background. There was one industry that was slowly, steadily exploding in value. That industry was beauty. At the time, in the late 1800s, most hair products marketed to black women were cheap, harmful, and poorly made. They did not work well. They damaged hair. They were dangerous. But Annie Malone saw something that other people missed completely. She saw a market opportunity. She saw a need that nobody was filling properly. She saw black women who wanted quality hair care products but could not find them anywhere. Instead of just selling cosmetics like everyone else, Annie Malone did something revolutionary. She built an entire financial system around beauty. Her company, called the Poro Company, did not just sell products. The Poro Company created something much bigger. It created training schools where women could learn the business. It created sales networks that spread across the country. It created employment for thousands of women who had never had financial opportunities before. Think of it like a franchise model decades before franchises were even a common idea in America. Each sales agent became a small business owner. Each product sale generated profit for the agent and for the company. And soon, money began pouring in from every direction. By the early 1900s, Annie Malone's company was making millions of dollars in revenue every single year. The money kept coming. The business kept growing. Her success was undeniable, and that is when she built something that shocked America. She built a mansion so large and so extravagant that people compared it directly to the estates of the richest men alive. But her real financial power was still growing. She was still building. She was still expanding. The best was not behind her. The best was still coming. At its peak, the Poro Company became one of the largest black-owned businesses in the entire world. It was not just a small business. It was not just a company making products. Her headquarters in St. Louis was not just a factory building. It was a complete financial ecosystem. Inside the Poro complex, there were manufacturing plants where products were made. There were training schools where women learned the business. There were dormitories where employees lived. There was a theater where people gathered. There were retail spaces where products were sold. Thousands of women trained there every single year. Many of them became financially independent for the first time in their entire lives. In modern terms, if we think about it today, Annie Malone built something like a multi-level distribution empire decades before companies like Avon even existed. Money flowed through every single layer of the system. Products moved from the company to the agents. Agents made sales and earned commissions. Training fees came in. Company profits grew. It was a complete system designed to make money at every step. But massive financial empires always create massive risks. When you build something that big, when you control something that powerful, when you have that much money flowing through your hands, things can go wrong very quickly. And Annie Malone made one decision that would eventually change everything about her life and her fortune. She hired a young saleswoman who came to work for her at the Poro Company. This young woman's name was Madam C.J. Walker. What happened next would spark one of the most famous business rivalries in all of American history. Madam C.J. Walker started as one of Annie Malone's sales agents. She was good at her job. She was smart. She worked hard. She learned the business from the ground up. She understood the marketing. She understood the financial structure. She understood how the system worked. Then one day, she made a decision. She left the Poro Company. She left Annie Malone. She launched her own beauty empire. She started competing directly with her former boss. Soon, Madam C.J. Walker became one of the most famous entrepreneurs in America. She built her own massive business. She made her own fortune. History would later celebrate her as the first self-made female millionaire in the United States. She would be remembered. She would be famous. She would be celebrated forever. But here is the twist that most people do not know about. At the time when Walker was becoming famous, Annie Malone was already wealthier than she was. Malone's company was bigger than Walker's company. Malone's distribution network was larger. Malone's revenue was stronger. Malone's empire was bigger in every way. But another financial storm was approaching. This storm was not coming from competitors outside the company. It was coming from inside her own life. It was coming from her personal decisions. Annie Malone entered a brutal divorce battle with her husband. The legal fight was long. The fight was painful. The fight was expensive. And the settlement. It cost her the equivalent of millions of dollars. It was one of the largest divorce payouts of its entire era. It was a financial disaster, but that was only the beginning of her problems. That was only the start of her troubles, because the mansion she had built years before would soon become a symbol of a fortune slipping away. The mansion of Annie Malone stood as proof of unimaginable wealth. It had massive halls with high ceilings. It had imported marble from Europe. It had architecture that came from Europe. It was a monument to success. It was a monument to her power. But while her lifestyle was extravagant and beautiful, most of her money was not going to maintain that mansion. Most of her money was going somewhere completely different. It was going to charity. Annie Malone was a philanthropist. She donated millions of dollars to education. She donated to orphanages. She donated to black institutions that helped her community. One of the biggest beneficiaries of her charity was a school called Stowe Teachers College. She gave massive amounts of money to help that school grow. In fact, some historians estimate that she donated more money to charity than John D. Rockefeller did during the exact same period of his life. She was more generous. She gave more away. She believed in helping others more than he did. But philanthropy takes money. Lawsuits take money. Economic downturns take money. All of these things slowly drained her fortune over time. The Great Depression hit businesses across America in the 1930s. Luxury spending collapsed completely. People stopped buying expensive beauty products. Investments that she had made shrank in value. The stock market crashed. The economy fell apart. And the once massive beauty empire began shrinking. Fewer people could afford her products. Fewer women wanted to become sales agents. The money stopped coming in like it used to. The business that had once been so powerful began to fade. The mansion that represented her wealth began to fall into disrepair. Nobody maintained it. Nobody cared for it. Eventually, it was abandoned completely. The fortune that she had built through years of hard work began to disappear. And the woman who once rivaled America's richest businessmen slowly faded from history. People forgot about her. People stopped talking about her. People stopped remembering what she had accomplished. The story of Annie Malone reveals something fascinating about money and power in America. We often remember the biggest fortunes. We remember the richest people. We remember the names that are most famous, but we forget the financial innovators who came first. We forget the people who created the ideas. We forget the people who built the systems. Annie Malone pioneered so many things. She pioneered beauty entrepreneurship when nobody else was doing it. She pioneered sales networks decades before they became common. She pioneered female financial independence in an era when women had almost no rights. She pioneered early franchise-style business models decades before the word franchise was even common. She built systems and ideas that changed American business forever. Many of the systems she built still exist today, more than 100 years later. Modern beauty giants still use similar business models. Direct sales companies still follow similar financial principles. Influencer product networks still work the same way that her sales network worked. They all follow similar financial principles that she invented. But Annie Malone's story also shows another important truth about life and money. Wealth can disappear very quickly. Markets change. Consumers stop buying what they used to buy. Economic crises hit without warning. Legal battles drain fortunes. Even the biggest empires can fade away. Even the most powerful people can lose their power. Which raises an uncomfortable question that we all need to think about. If someone as powerful as Annie Malone could lose her financial dominance, what does that say about wealth today? If she could go from being wealthier than Rockefeller to being forgotten, what does that mean for modern billionaires? And how many other financial pioneers have been quietly forgotten by history? How many other people built incredible things but nobody remembers them anymore? How many other stories like Annie Malone's are out there, hidden in the pages of history? Annie Malone built one of the first beauty empires in America. She spent massive fortunes on philanthropy and charity. She helped thousands of women achieve financial independence for the first time in their lives. She created a business model that still influences how companies work today. Yet today her mansion stands as a forgotten monument to a lost fortune. It sits empty, it sits abandoned. It reminds us of what was and what is no longer. It reminds us of how quickly things can change. It reminds us that fame and fortune are not permanent. They can disappear. They can fade away. And the people who built incredible things can be erased from history. So here is the question that we should all be asking. How many other financial pioneers have we forgotten? How many other people invented important things but nobody remembers them? How many other women built incredible businesses but their stories are lost to time? How many other black entrepreneurs changed America but nobody gives them credit? These are important questions. These are questions worth thinking about. These are questions that should make us wonder about what else we have forgotten. Annie Malone deserves to be remembered. She deserves to be celebrated. She deserves to have her story told and retold for generations to come. She was a pioneer. She was an innovator. She was a business genius. She was a philanthropist. She changed American business forever, but she has been forgotten. Her mansion sits empty. Her company is gone. Her fortune has disappeared, and her name is not remembered by most people today. That is a tragedy. That is a loss. That is something we should all work to change. The story of Annie Malone is the story of America itself. It is a story of opportunity and success. It is a story of innovation and hard work. It is a story of generosity and giving, but it is also a story of loss. It is a story of how quickly things can change. It is a story of how powerful people can be forgotten. It is a story that shows us that history is written by the people who remember it, and if we do not remember Annie Malone, she will be lost forever. We must tell her story. We must share her legacy. We must make sure that future generations know who she was and what she accomplished. We must celebrate the financial pioneers who came before us. We must honor the people who built the systems that we use today. We must remember the innovators who changed America. Because if we do not remember them, if we do not tell their stories, if we do not give them credit for what they did, then we lose an important part of our history. Annie Malone was a woman ahead of her time. She was a businesswoman in an era when women had almost no business rights. She was a black entrepreneur in an era when black people were not given equal opportunities. She was a philanthropist in an era when charity was not common. She was a pioneer in an era when being a pioneer was dangerous. She overcame obstacles that most of us cannot even imagine. She built something incredible. She changed the world. And she deserves to be remembered. So the next time you use a beauty product, the next time you think about entrepreneurship, the next time you think about business, remember Annie Malone. Remember the woman who built an empire before most people even knew such things were possible. Remember the woman who spent her fortune helping others. Remember the woman whose mansion sits empty but whose legacy should never be forgotten. Remember that history is not always told truthfully. Remember that great people are sometimes left out of the story. And remember that it is our job to make sure that the true stories are told and that the real pioneers are remembered for what they did. The mansion of Annie Malone stands empty today, but it does not have to be forgotten. The fortune is gone, but the legacy can be rebuilt. The business has disappeared, but the story can live on. Annie Malone can be remembered. She can be celebrated. She can be honored. All we have to do is tell her story. All we have to do is remember. All we have to do is share what she accomplished with others. Because history belongs to those who tell it, and it is time that we told Annie Malone's story correctly.